Hello and welcome to Azure Notebooks and Overview. My name is Brian Kafferkey and I am wearing my Python shirt today in honor of the topic, which we'll understand in a minute why Jupyter is related. And I don't have a special mug today, so it's just my regular mug. All the other ones are being cleaned, so it's typical boring old orange mug. And again, my name is Brian Kafferkey. I'm a Data and AI Solutions Enabler for Microsoft. And I'm going to jump in. And best of all, though, when we talk about Microsoft Azure Notebooks, they're free, or at least right now it's in preview and it's being offered free. So jump on and take advantage of at least while it lasts. I hope they keep it that way. And I think I'm pretty hopeful it will stay free. And I'll talk about why it's so great and why I think it may even stay free. But a couple of highlights here. Spoiler alert, you'll see Jupyter, be more of that kind of spoiler alert going on. So Azure Notebooks are actually Jupyter Notebooks on Azure. And I'm highlighting kind of the two primary languages around that. Python and R are supported. But the whole idea of Jupyter is multi-language support, etc. So where are we going for this? I'm going to try to keep this pretty concise, so not going to drag this on. But we'll get into what are Azure Notebooks, why is this such a great thing, features, and then a demonstration, of course, to really walk through it. That's going to be the bulk of this. And then I'll talk about getting started. And of course, again, it's a free Jupyter Notebook service running on Azure. It's a little Jupyter logo there. Let's jump in. Oh, and I did want to call your attention to the fact that I do have a detailed tutorial demo of Jupyter Notebook, so a whole introduction there. So at the end, hopefully I'll remember to put the link there. You can click on it, but just go to that video and that'll do a very detailed explanation of what Jupyter Notebooks are and how to use them. Now I will touch on this here and now, so you will get a pretty good idea of what Jupyter Notebooks are anyway. But assuming you're interested and you think this is as awesome as I do, then you'll probably want to go see that video, which will give you a lot more details about using Jupyter Notebooks. So what are Azure Notebooks? So you can see this screen I took off of Microsoft's site, which basically says develop and run code from anywhere with Jupyter Notebooks on Azure. So that's really, I guess, the takeaway. You can be anywhere. It's hosted on the cloud. It's in Azure, so you can do all this stuff. A lot of really great features. There's a link here, and the slides, this will be available. I'll post a link later, but it's on my GitHub account, so github.com/bkafferkey/shared, and you'll be able to get the slides for this. And you can see the little link right here, azure.com, though, where you can get notebooksazure.com, where you can sign up for this service. So we'll kind of go through that in the demo. Jupyter and more. So kind of a little background on what is Jupyter Notebooks if you're not familiar. If you see references in Python, you see a lot of references to IPython. And IPython is really an interactive console for Python, just like a prompt like you'd get in PowerShell or a bash prompt or whatever. But I think what's a little distinctive about the IPython prompt is that really it renders visually as well. So you can do matplotlib and Seaborn and things that visuals right in stream with it. And it's a very interactive kind of experience. And it's very popular and has been for a long time with Python. But the problem with it is it was only for Python. So when it got opened up to support multiple languages, they renamed the project or branched it off to Jupyter Notebooks. And the idea of it is to say we support multiple languages such as Julia and Python and R and many, many other languages. In fact, there's something like, oh God, last time I checked, I think it was 75 plus, so it's probably like 80 languages plus now. And I'll kind of explain a little bit why that's possible because of the open architecture of the Jupyter Notebook. But it's a very cool thing. And by the way, the reason Jupyter is also, notice it's misspelled because of Python reference, but also it's got a reference to Galileo's Jupyter Notebooks, really the moons of Jupiter that he did. So kind of a couple of bows to different things going on here. So this is taken from the Jupyter Notebook website. And you can see on the right, it's basically allows visuals and things in place. We'll see that in the demo. The number one takeaway, I think, from this is that Jupyter Notebook is multi-language. It runs in your browser. So you got a browser, you can run Jupyter Notebooks. And if you run it locally, which you can do if you have, you can install it directly, or you can use like the Anaconda distribution of Python, which comes with the Jupyter Notebook. And it runs the web service locally. But you kind of get some nice scale up and sharing options when you do it in a hosted environment. So there's Jupyter Hub, and there's also now Azure Notebooks. So what are the features of Jupyter Notebook? Because that's really going to be a big part of what you're getting. Well, first of all, Jupyter Notebooks is open source. It's written in Python and supports Python, but it also supports, as I mentioned, other languages. It supports real-time execution and rendering. It's meant to be a very interactive environment for developing things. So if you haven't used notebooks before, it's a little different kind of experience. But at the end of the day, a Jupyter Notebook really is more or less an IDE, an interactive development environment that you can write your code in. Many languages supported, and it supports things too. And this isn't so much that it's specific to Jupyter, but being that it is an IDE, if you have an API supported, like through PySpark, you can connect with Python to Spark, and SparkR and SparklyR as well. You can then use those. So Jupyter really is just a front end in those cases. When you connect to back-end tools, whether it's relational databases or big data tools, platforms, then you're kind of passing it through. Now, you're not taking on, because sometimes people get confused, they think that it's the Jupyter Notebook that's doing all the work. But really, Jupyter Notebook is just going to be passing your requests through, and it's going to be that platform on the other end that's going to do the real heavy lifting. And you can share your notebooks on GitHub, Jupyter Hub, and Azure Notebooks itself. And that's a really nice feature. And a nice feature also is that there's built-in viewer support in GitHub. So if you click on a notebook in GitHub, it will actually display to you. You can't edit it there, but you can see the notebook and its outputs if they were saved with it. So nice feature. Now, the thing that's cool about the Jupyter Notebook is it has this open-ended kernel architecture. What the kernel architecture essentially means is it's got a plug-and-play architecture around languages. So as long as somebody writes the program to interact with Jupyter Notebook to conform to the requirements of the Jupyter Notebook kernel, then it can serve as a kernel. So whatever language you have, it doesn't really matter if you write a kernel for it, then you can have it plug into a Jupyter Notebook and you can use that language with it. So right now, you can see here there's Python, R, Julia, Ruby, Perl, PowerShell, and on and on and on. So lots of people have written kernels for this. So it's pretty cool. Nice thing also is that the notebook itself is just a text file. It's JSON, so it's basically name value pairs. And that's it. Because of that simple architecture, it allows you to do some really nice things. For instance, there's a program called the NB Convert, Notebook Convert, which allows you to put your notebook through processors. And we'll look at things like Markdown and stuff, and Markdown supports all kinds of documentation in it. So you could do anything from creating slides from your notebooks to creating a book, a manuscript, PDFs, etc. And that's used through these exporters and processors that are around it that will just translate it and do it in different formats. And there's a lot of pretty cool support around that. So it's becoming a really popular place. We've been using Markdown for a lot of things at Microsoft to do documentation. Not using maybe Jupyter Notebooks for everything like that yet, but it's certainly becoming important for a lot of our training. So now's the fun part, the demos. Got my little notes there to make sure I talk about all the things we need to talk about. So let me pop out here for a minute. I'm going to be honest, let me log out because I'm actually on a notebook, I think. But let me close out for a minute. And I'm going to go here. And I'll just go here. And what I want to do is say I'm going to go look for Azure Notebook. And I do have a link in the slides, but really it's not difficult. It's pretty easy to find. Right here, Azure Notebook. You go here, and you saw from the slide earlier. Now, the really cool thing, you can go in here and get all kinds of projects to start with. I'm really excited about a couple of these. One is the Azure ML services. I'm actually doing the training for MS Learn, which you can find on the Azure ML service or machine learning lowercase service, which is specific to a way of using containerization like Kubernetes and Docker containers for your machine learning and all kinds of cool stuff. And this has all kinds of labs around it. You can go right in here and you can get all these notebooks and things related to it. Or I can say, I just want to look at how to access data. So there's all this stuff in GitHub around that. So you get all this. And what's really cool too is if you go here, I actually have this book. It's the Python data analysis book that's written by Wes McKinney, who wrote Pandas. And you get all of his example notebooks here out of the box. You can just pull this in, and we're going to look at that a little bit later. So I think that's really cool. And the other one is this other one by Jake Vanderplas, which is the Data Science Handbook, and that's got a lot of his code, etc., related to the notebooks around the data science end. So you get a lot of good stuff to get started. Linear regression, all kinds of other stuff. Data science, we saw that. So you get a lot of different pieces in here. Another one over here. The languages are supported, we can see here, is Python 2, Python 3, and R and F sharp. So we're not going to get all the different languages. Maybe, they'll add more later. I think it depends on demand. But the big ones really, I think now, is Python 3 and R. And so for me, those are the big ones. But I know a lot of people love F sharp, so that's great they have that as well. All right, so I'm actually logged in right now, but I'm going to log out so I can log back in. And let me go back. If I can. Hopefully, good. And what I want to do, let's see, sign out. And what I want to do is when you want to sign in, you just go here and say sign in. And I have a lot of accounts here, so I'm going to pick the one that I'm using currently, my Brian256 account. And I've already set up my account. I'll show you a few slides later. It's very easy to set up. The only thing I'll say, and I'll probably say several times, in order to use the Azure Notebooks, you do have to have some type of Microsoft account. So you can open up, I have a legacy, this is an MSN account, and it still works. But you could have, an Office one or whatever you need, and you can do that. And if you don't have one, it's not a problem. You can just create one, and then you can just use it for this. But you can see here I've got a bunch of demos. There's in here you can have my account, and you can see there's a profile. You can fill out profile information and stuff about yourself. It'll give you a default ID, but you can change it, etc. And so I've got kind of stuff here. I can go here in my profile. So this is already showing. And I have something called projects. So I can go to my projects, but you can also see my projects listed. So let me go to my projects. And you can see in my projects, I've got these listed different projects. If I want, I can just click on new project. And I can create a brand new project here. So let's do that for a minute just to show. And I'll create a new project. And a couple of things to notice. I can make it public or private. I'll just make it private for now. I would say if you really want heavy-duty secure stuff, I would be a little bit more cautious. Maybe I don't know enough about it. But if you really said, I want to secure this, I'd probably use something more integrated with Azure. Maybe your own VM and stuff for storing things if you really have to be careful. But it is private, so that's good. You can initialize it just with a README file, which is fine. Calling it new project, and notice it's kind of giving this project ID for it. We'll say create, and in spite of the fact it's private, it does allow me to create links and things. So I believe I can share it. I have not tried that officially, but should work. But here we are, and now I'm in a new area, and I say I want to do something. So I can create a notebook. So let's do that. I'm going to say create a notebook, and it's going to ask what language do I want. Now, if you are starting new and you're doing Python, then do Python 3.6. 2.7 is basically a legacy deprecated version of the language. No enhancements, nothing new is going to be happening than anything 2.x. And so the newest version is 3.6. Or you can use R if you like R. And then just give my notebook a name. So it's, I'll say it demo notebook. And I have some more interesting ones because I'm probably not those creative on the fly. But now I can go in and notice I can check next to it and do things like preview. I can edit. I'm not sure what I would do in that case. I can download this particular notebook. I can do all kinds of things here. I do have a terminal. I'll show that in a minute. I can upload files. But let's just go in now and do what we're here for, is create a notebook. So it's a little different than typical Jupyter Notebook because we first create the file essentially for the notebook, and then we go and say, okay, let's do something with the notebook. Now, if you're not familiar with Jupyter Notebook, I'll give you a real quick demo. Again, my other thing will go further. But it's an environment where we're working in a browser. So the first thing we can do here is I can just create Python code. Quick tip, if you don't know how to tell Python 2.x from 3, the print statement is the easiest way. Print after 3 is basically parentheses. The print 2.x is print space. So I know, I'll do the corny hello world, the obligatory. And you can see what I did is I pressed Shift Enter, and Shift Enter will advance and execute the cell. So you can see it output right here, and it executed and move forward. If I do Control Enter, it will also run it, but it doesn't advance the cell. And I can also just say run this command this way, and that works. That's like Shift Enter. I can navigate the cells around. This will actually move the cell, so if I want to move that cell up, I can do that. If I want to move it back down. So this whole toolbar is great for navigating, managing the cells. I can cut a cell by clicking on the Cut button. I can paste it, or I can just, I can say Edit, paste cell below. You can paste it back or whatever. I can also do the plus to get another open cell. If I want to save, I can just click the disk icon. I can also do things here. I'll talk about that in a minute. But I have file things here too. I can say, you know, I want to open a different thing. I want to upload. I can make a copy. I can rename the file. If I say rename, it just gives me the chance to rename the file. I can print preview, all this stuff, download the notebook into different formats. Again, all kinds of stuff I can do. I'm not going to get into all these things, but I can copy and move cells. I'll talk a little more about cells. But there are essentially two most important types of cells. There are documentation cells and there are code cells. And a couple of other ones that are not very critical, but those are the most important. So far, we've seen a code cell. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but you can do a bunch of things in here. Nice thing you can do also is insert images, which isn't something you used to be able to do, but I'll kind of give you a quick demo of that. If I go to Bing and I just say Azure something, I don't know what I'm going to do, and I'll look for, say, an image. Kind of cool thing I can do is say, yeah, I think I'll paste that right into my picture. So I'll click on it. I'll just right mouse click and say copy image. Go into my notebook. And I'm going to have to turn this into what's called a markdown cell, right? And I'll say my notebook. If I can learn how to type. And what I'm going to do is I want this to be formatted kind of like HTML. Markdown cells are intended for documentation. And I mentioned there's code cells and documentation. So markdown cells are meant for documentation. And I'm going to do Control V. And it automatically generates this little ping image and the attachment. And I've got my notebook with a nice little icon there. That's a relatively new feature of Jupyter Notebooks. I really like it because it used to be you'd have to find an image, place it somewhere, and point to it. This makes it a little bit easier. It kind of embeds it right within the notebook. And you can see here my notebook. And I can just use the arrow key to now move that. And so that could be like the title to my notebook. I can say who wrote it, what day it was, all that kind of stuff. These markdown cells are really important because when I go in here, I can do all kinds of things with them. So I can do 2 tags. The £1 is like an H1 tag for HTML. 2 is more slightly smaller, so it's like an H2 tag, you know, by Brian Cafferty. And then I can do like 3 tags, and I can say something like March 2019, and you can see that they're all different sizes, and I get my image. So it's a good place to do documentation. There's a lot of things you can do in there. You can do CSS type stuff. You can put links. You can do things. Anything you can do kind of with HTML. There's a LaTeX type of language in there that allows you to do complex like machine learning formulas, statistical formulas, and put it in there. So a key thing about notebooks is they're really great for documenting, doing research, and collaborating on work where you want to include notes and things like, I haven't finished this piece, but I need to do this. Or maybe you've discovered some anomalies in the data. So a key takeaway with machine learning, data science, and everything, it's not easy for people who come from a development background to get the heads around is this is not your typical program where you get your spec, you go end to end, you write it, you deploy it, and you're done. It's much more iterative. You kind of get an idea like, we want to see if we can maybe improve sales, or maybe we want to see if we can identify the risk of people, say, having diabetes before it happens. Well, we don't know we even can do it to start. We have to explore the data we have. We may find that we are missing data and we have to go out and get other data and bring it in. We have to clean it up, and we may go through many iterations, and then we may try different types of models and see which one works and do a lot of comparisons. So it's really hard to, I don't really put estimates even for sometimes time on those things, but certainly it's not just an end-to-end process. And because of that, it can involve many people. Some people may really be involved in that data wrangling end, and other people more in the machine learning end. So they'll want to collaborate. And it also is something where you might have more senior and all different people who can put their notes in, like, I added this step which cleans up something. It looks like there's a problem with the patient data, or there's a problem with the check-in date or something. So all these things can really be used to kind of document the process as you go, and again, make it more iterative. So Jupyter Notebooks are not really meant to be sort of that IDE. If you were doing something like writing a Django app, which is a web app for Python, not the right tool for it at all. But if you're doing data science, you're using pandas and Python, say, and scikit-learn, etc., perfect. Really ideal for that. We'll see more of that. But you can see now we've got my comments. I've got this brilliant statement here. A couple of cool things, too, is Azure Notebooks installs a lot of the common libraries you want to use. So I can start right off the bat and say I want to import pandas as PD. No errors. And there's a lot of stuff in there. And I've got notebooks to actually write things because I'm not the best at writing code on the fly. I'd rather use examples that look cool because it's easier, right? But the takeaway from all this is you got a lot of cool stuff. This is a really handy thing. I don't know everyone knows about this. You click on this little toolbar and it tells you all the shortcuts. So if you're somebody who likes to work with keyboard shortcuts, it's right there. You can also do something pretty cool. This isn't a great example. I've one better, but I can say, I can turn something into slides. So if I go here real quick, say cell, I can say cell type, the view, slideshow, yeah. So I go view, cell toolbar, slideshow, and then you notice that this icon appears and I can say, okay, that's a slide. And you can do slide fragments and kind of combine things, but I'm just going to do 3 slides. And then I can say, okay, make a slideshow out of this. And notice that now I can say, oh, let me step through my stuff. Now, what's nice about being able to do that is that here's the key. If you do things like PowerPoint and other slides, they're fixed, right? So if you have to make an error in your code, you got to rerun it, refresh with new data, you're going to have to rerun the slide, get the data, and then copy it over like your images or whatever. In a notebook, you don't have to. You can just run the notebook as a program and it will refresh everything. In fact, all I have to do to refresh this notebook to run everything is go cells, run all, and it will run from top to bottom, so it just runs the entire program. So it's great for when you want to do it. Now, being a slideshow now, I do that. I get all new refreshes, all new images. This could be visualizations, etc. And I can just start going through a slide, maybe presenting to management or to a user group or whatever. So it's really handy in that way. And that's why this makes a lot less work to maintain what you're doing and show it. And there's utilities that you can take. NB convert I talked about. It's beyond the scope of this. Maybe I'll do a video later. But NB convert can be used to take the output of this and then take the notebook and convert it into an actual HTML slideshow or different things. But this little utility here, which is actually an extension you have to add into it, is this slideshow utility, so you can do it right in the notebook. So again, it's kind of nice that Azure Notebooks comes pretty heavily loaded with things. So you get all that. Something else I'm trying to think I want to do here. If I do pip list, I believe, then it should list. It takes a bit to do. It's going to list all the modules or packages, I should say, that are installed. So you can see a lot of Azure. We'll talk about that too. But it's one of the reasons why Azure Notebooks are a phenomenal place to learn and develop and do work with Azure, because you've got everything ready to go. It's installed. But you can see Docker's installed and things like that. Pandas installed, IPython kernels or whatever. All these different pieces are on here. A Pillow is installed. So you get a lot of stuff in here. Most of what you're going to need, things I use, typically are already here. It's only going to be those ancillary packages, the things are not normally installed. They'll have to go get. And you can do that. So I go back here. If I want to install a package, all I really have to do is just say something, install it. Well, actually, a good way to do is do something like this: conda install my package, which of course doesn't exist, so I should get an error. But basically, it's going to try to do that now with conda and try to install what you asked for. So it can't do this. I'm going to interrupt the kernel because it's not going to work. And up here, you can stop the kernel and recycle, so I'll just stop it. And you get a lot of stuff. You got widgets and all these kind of cool things that you can do. So widgets allow you to insert like GUI controls and things in it, so you can interact with your notebook, all kinds of stuff with the cells. And that's kind of the basic. Notice the right-hand corner shows you what kernel you're using, in this case Python, so you can see that. So I'm going to save and then close. So when you're done, you just say close and halt. I'll get out of this. I don't need that. And I'm back to my project here. And so we've got this notebook. I'm going to go back up to my projects, do a little bit more of a demo. I'm going to go to this MS demo one. And a couple of things I want to show you. So one thing that would be really useful, right, would be the ability to upload data. Well, let's create, I have this folder, but just to show you, I can create a folder and I can call it something like, we'll call it AdventureWorks, AW, right? Because we're going to store AdventureWorks data there. hit enter. And now you see it's there. And if I click on it, I can go into that folder. And I'm going to put files there. So I'm going to say, let me upload from a URL if it was on URL like a website or something. But I'll just say from my own computer. Choose files. And I'm going to go Python here. We'll go data, AW, and I'm going to pull up something. So I'll pull up dim customer. And I'm just locate the file, then just say open. And then I just have to say upload. And that's going to upload that CSV file to space on in my notebook or in my environment. And now you see it there. And I can even click on it. And it will try to render it and let me see what the file looks like. Okay, took a while. But you can see it just kind of rendered, gave me a look at the file. So that took a few minutes. I may have shortened it a little bit for you guys. But you can see this has headers at the top, and then it's just a CSV file. So we're good to go. Let's go back. And I'm going to go back to the demo. And just kind of walk through what we can do, for instance. I'm going to go here, and I want to use the file I uploaded. Now, I actually have uploaded something in data. You can see here. So I've already done this. I'll show you that, but I can also do other files. So I'm going to use Pandas SQL, because I'm going to use SQL to go after it, because SQL is cool, right? And one of the cool things is that not everyone may be aware, but you can do Python and SQL together using Pandas. So it's kind of cool. It's actually the easiest way, I think, to jumpstart and get into using SQL with Python. And you can do it right here. So you can use Pandas, but then use Pandas SQL. And we can use all these different things. And it actually comes with some predefined data sets we can even use with it, which is great. So in this particular case, and I'm going to, you can do something here. So I'll say cell clear. Current output's clear. And then you see cell, the output goes away. So I'll run this. Takes a second to run. But then it did this query. It's basically using the Irish data set, which if you do R, you also know it's very popular there. So what I'm able to do, and this is a whole separate potential topic I may cover, but in a quick and dirty way, what I can do is now take data frames and using SQLDF, which if it sounds familiar to R, it is, you can now do queries as if the data frames were SQL tables, which is really cool. Underneath the covers, it's using SQLite to kind of simplify the whole process. And I can even do, using those doc strings, multi-language, I can do multiple lines like this. So you get all kinds of cool stuff you can do. Yeah, so I got all these different pieces here. But one of the things I wanted to show you, for instance, is I uploaded that file. Now, you remember I had a file uploaded. Not sure why this. All output. I'm going to do clear. Oops, didn't want to do that. All output clear. Okay. So what I want to do now is I'm going to bring in a file from the data side, which is that AW product. So I'll run that. And let's just make sure I have this loaded. I didn't lose anything here. Okay. And now DF product is loaded. Let me insert a cell here. Oh, you can just select right here, DF product. So notice what I did. I set a file path, which is up from where I am in my notebook, up one to data, and then I come down it and I just use that file path and put it together with the CSV file. And if I do this ls command, you can see, just so you know, there's the file. It is sitting there. And now I can actually do a SQL statement using that table. So using the data frame, I'm able to just do direct queries against it, which is handy. And I can use because it's a data frame, I can do the normal things you can do with the data frame, like use the head statement, etc. And that file doesn't exist yet. But you'll notice that I also did something here. I'm going to swipe this for a minute and insert it. I could have cut and pasted. I should really copy it. And here I think I said, what did I call this? AW, so I want to make sure I know where it is. So I'm going to say, in this case, AW. And let me just change that to, so I can tell what it is called. ls, just a file command. So dim customer. So here I'm going to say, yeah, read in dim customer CSV, and I'll just call it cust, just to show you that I was able to upload this file, and now I'm going to read it in as a CSV. And let's move this cell up for a minute because I'm going to override it for a minute. And now what I can do is just say, I'm going to change this to cust. We run it. And it pulls from the customer file. Riveting. So just for background, in case you're not sure, where did this AW? AW actually is an abbreviation for AdventureWorks, and AdventureWorks is a fictitious company that Microsoft created, and then what they did is they just built a massive database and data set all around it, which is innocuous since the data is false. It's not a real company. It's all fictional. But you can do complete stuff with it. So it's an entire database and data warehouse set of tables you can use. So I extracted some of that and just bring it in now to create data frames. So it's pretty cool here what you can do. So this gives you some idea, but I'm obligatory to show you sort of a cooler notebook than this. The visuals are really where it gets fun. So let me go into this notebook. And I'll just run through some things. Typically in a Jupyter notebook, when you have output with matplotlib, you use this statement that tells it to do it inline, which causes the visuals to render in place. And then you can do kind of cool stuff. So this takes a sec, but you should see some graphics. So you see this nifty graphic here, very cool. And that will do something. So you can do cool stuff with it. And again, I think this is the important thing with the visuals is to give you the idea of just how much you can do within Jupyter notebooks. So you can imagine, as you're going through, you could have markdown cells explaining, the charts going up and what's happening to sales or what's happening to customer demand or whatever you're trying to explain, sentiment analysis or whatever. So the ability to combine these things is really cool. In a typical IDE, which a lot of, again, developers have a hard time around, you would never do this, right? You wouldn't be writing a web app and having visuals and plots and graphs and stuff in it. So it's a very different experience, and because it's a different set of needs. This is very data-centric and analysis-centric. All right, so there's a lot of good stuff here. Let me close this out for a minute. And if I want to rename it, all I have to do is go in here and say File, Rename, and I can rename it there. Be a little bit careful, though, because I was playing around when I did that. When you get back to here, make sure you refresh your screen if you renamed it, because I found it was left the old name. The page had to be refreshed. All right, so we looked at a few of these things. Now there's a couple other things we can do also. We can click this button and we'll be dropped into a terminal. So kind of cool. We have an actual terminal, a bash terminal, and it's like our own little machine we can do things with. And if I wanted to, I could do like pip install here as well, or pip or conda install. I prefer conda, so I probably go with conda install, blah, blah, blah. So it's pretty nifty that you can do that. You can exit here. I'm just going to go back. What's that? Okay, so that was the terminal. The other thing you can do, let's see, you can go, you can also download a project. You can go into project settings. And project settings, you can change the name. You can say whether it's public or not. You can also do an environment thing. So I can add an environment. And an environment there's kind of two flavors here, really. There's one that use the settings, the requirements.txt file, which will set the dependencies you need for this project. So the idea is you have different projects that may have certain package dependencies that are not built into the environment you have. So you can put it in the requirements file and it will automatically load those. A lot of times people, when they build things in Python in particular, they'll use a virtual environment. And so you can see down here, you can do that. You can set up an environment YAML file, which is kind of like a conda version of it basically for an environment. And it will, basically these are all designed to set up dependencies so that if you needed to create a new environment, whether it be your own, on your own machine or in another Jupyter Hub or anywhere, that dependencies will tell everything needed for your notebooks to run. So that's the idea behind it. I've used it mostly with really Django, because Django, you really want to create, dependency is really key. But the idea is things can be a bit fragile if you don't have the right versions. Maybe one package doesn't work with an older package that you're trying to work with. But if you have the dependencies all set, you would deploy things like that together. So that's really the idea. I'm not going to get heavily into this. There's online documentation. I'll point you to links, but I do want you to be aware that that is something you can do. So it's pretty cool. The other thing you can do is clone a project. So if I clone, I can create a copy of a project I've got. And if I go back here, another thing I can do is, let's look at something like Python for data analysis. I want to, or better yet, the Azure ML getting started. And what I can do here is say, I'm going to clone this. And this is kind of cool because I can create my own I'll say it start project, and I can just say, and I don't want it to be public, so I'll say no, clone. And what it did is it gave me a jump start. So I'm doing a lot of work right now on training related to the Azure Machine Learning Service. And a nice thing is when you're trying to understand that particular service, these are really handy, these notebooks. And what I did was I just walked through and I cloned the GitHub notebooks for this. And now they're available on my own environment, and I can just sort of step through things. And I should be all set. I should be able, for instance, run this statement. And it's imported those libraries, etc. And I can now interact with Azure's environment for doing machine learning workspace. Obviously, I need a subscription and the other pieces for Azure. But trust me, you want to use these if you're going to try to learn how to use the Azure Machine Learning Service, because there's a lot of complexity to it, and it's just the nature of it. So there's a lot of pieces, and these notebooks are really good to kind of help you get started and not get too confused. I find myself, it's a lot to it. So if you think so, you're not alone. But it makes sense it would be, because you're doing an awful lot with these things. All right, so let me go back. Another really kind of cool thing, if I go back here for a minute. But realize that just created a whole new thing. So by going here, and I want to just back up from it and make sure it's clear what I did. I was already logged in, that's key. And then I was able to go back to that main screen where we started from and find one of those projects we had and copy it. So let's see if I can do that again. So here I am. Now I'm still logged in. So if I wanted to, for instance, get Python data analysis, which are great notebooks to get started with pandas, click on that, and I can just say clone, and I will get this entire set. And I can say this, it says PyData book. So all I have to do, I can say public, and I'll just say no, clone. And it's creating an entire project and copy of this environment for me. And now these are basically notebooks that are just for me to use, my own copy of these. That's great, because it's a good book, and this is the materials that go with the book. These are the notebooks for that book. So really good way to, again, get started on doing this stuff. So okay, Python here, Python basics, all kinds of cool stuff here. All right. All right, let me close out of that. Go back to my projects. And let me check my slide. Did I cover everything? We talked about uploading data files. We talked about projects. So projects are just really just what it says. You've got something you want to do. You want to relate your files together. Maybe you got a bunch of notebooks. You have certain data files and potentially dependencies. You have certain packages you're going to need for that project. So you might want to isolate it and say this project requires these packages be installed with it, etc. These dependencies. We talked about cloning projects. We talked a little about project environments related to those dependencies. So let's go back into our slides and kind of cover the rest of this. So we now know what Jupyter Notebooks are. We've seen a walkthrough of using Azure Notebooks, which are Jupyter Notebooks with extra features. So I want to kind of highlight those extra features beyond Jupyter Notebooks. One, most of the popular libraries are installed. Not sure if they used Anaconda's distribution. Kind of think they did, plus a bunch of Azure libraries on top of that. But I can't speak for what it is, but it does have most of the libraries I would ever use seem to be there, so that's good. But you can also do an install of other things you want. So I didn't go through an actual install because I couldn't think of a package I needed that on top of these, but if you did, you can do your typical pip install or conda install. You can upload data, which I really like. There are some constraints and limits I'll talk about in a minute about how much, etc. But I mean, obviously, if you're going to do notebooks, you're going to want to get to data. Bear in mind, you can always do connections from these notebooks to things like if you're on, well, you to things like the to Azure. So you could go connecting to like an Azure SQL DB, Azure Data Warehouse, etc. Whatever you want to get to, there's always those options. So you're not just limited to what you can upload. Projects, you can customize your project environment, your dependencies, virtual environments, that kind of thing. You can also leverage, if you have an Azure subscription and you've got a company that's involved with that, you can switch over. I'm not show this, but I don't really have time to get into. I don't want to take too long, I guess, but you can actually switch over to your Azure subscription and just change your notebook to use that. So that's a nice feature too. If people seem to be really interested in that, maybe I'll do an extended video on this and go into that. But if you go to the help, I'll point to some of the help files as we go through this. It explains all of that anyway. But you can just say, I want to use my own VM. And the reason you might want to do that is you can get more high powered. There's some constraints on what you're going to be able to do here. I like those Jumpstart notebooks because they get you right in. So that's really handy because you want to play with things. Maybe you want to learn pandas, you want to learn data science. You got those to start with. And if you are doing Azure, so if you happen to be a shop that's looking at Azure, you want to start learning it, or just start using it in your actual business, it's a really good place to begin because you've got everything ready to go and everything's installed, and highly valuable that way. And I recommend doing it that way as much as possible just because it's really great. The idea that you have privacy support, you can actually have private libraries, is great because I know on like GitHub, they give it free as long as it's all public. Most services seem to always do that as a way to kind of get you. So I'm impressed that Microsoft's saying you can actually have private libraries in this, so it doesn't force you into a paid service. The limitations here are, it's free, but obviously they want to make sure you don't do too much. 4 gig of memory is a limit and 1 gig of data. All right, so you do have to kind of handle it that way. That said, you could probably create multiple accounts and do things as well. It's not really intended to be, so I should say, notebooks are not intended to be the free ones, really like heavy duty business use, really more for the use cases I'm going to describe. So things like having an instant learning environment. I think if there was one overriding reason Microsoft has Azure Notebooks, it's as a learning and training tool. That's really what I think it is. That's why I'm grateful for it being there, because that's what I do a lot of. And it's great for that because you don't have to worry about installing Anaconda and the tools and how do I use this and how do I use pip and all this other stuff. You can just jump in and start going to examples and notebooks and learning. It's good for collaboration, right? So you can share, trade with your friends, all work on the same notebooks, etc. So you get a lot of ability to do that kind of thing. I don't think it supports, I'm not sure how it works, but I haven't played with this, if 2 people are editing the notebook at the same time. But you can certainly share them in the sense that you can share your notebooks and people can go after them. They're really good for, again, teaching and presentations. I like this because I go to present at like a SQL Saturday or some event, and my notebooks can be read online. I don't even have to have them on my machine. Wherever I go, as long as I can connect to the internet, I can start presenting. And you saw how notebooks can be itself a slideshow. I can go through and start presenting any kind of topic that I can do in a notebook, which is great. And by the way, when we go to a lot of conferences, I'm going to be speaking at the Spark and AI conference. People there typically do just do everything within a notebook. I may not because I like PowerPoint slides, but you can do that. Really nice other thing, and I'm doing this now actually looking strongly at as part of my training work, is using notebooks as sort of a lab environment, right? Because you can say, here's some notebooks. You can have people go to GitHub and bring them in. So you get all this material, and they have the environment right there that they can execute the materials, and all the libraries are there, especially for Azure. So if you're doing any kind of Azure training, really this is great. It's free, and you can train, and people can create their own environments and work with it. So what could be better? Again, the price is hard to beat. Again, getting started with Azure is a great thing for this, kind of beating that to death. So this is the kind of pre-getting started, but there's lots of other GitHub notebooks and libraries. Just search on GitHub for anything you're looking, and you'll find lots of notebooks and things you can bring in. And if you look here, kind of highlighting the Python data analysis and data science handbook, because I think those are really good ones for people that are just starting out with Python and stuff. The books aren't there per se, but all the materials, all the code is available there. And again, touching on what languages are covered, these are languages. So this is not the extended every kernel you can think of that you would get if you installed Jupyter on your own machine. But bear in mind, if you install Jupyter on your own machine, you still have to locate and install those individual kernels. It does not come pre-installed. Last time I installed Jupyter, it gave me Python, and that was it. And if I wanted R, I actually had to find the R kernel, and other ones I had to install separately, which is a little bit confusing, or can be. Okay, a lot of learning resources. So I'm going to click here, and you can see tutorials, creating and sharing notebooks, migrating, etc., cloning, etc. Now, really great thing on these tutorials is you can go here and just go through the quick starts, how to sign up, set a user ID, creating and sharing. So go through this. The link is in this notebook. If you Bing or whatever and search for anything on Azure Notebooks, you'll find these things. You get sample notebooks, all kinds of stuff here you can get help with, concepts, accounts, and profiles. And this stuff you can enter in your profile. I kind of took it light. So you've got all these different topics. So you can really work your way through all this and accessing data resources. Oh, and what this was here. So this link points you to a pretty new platform Microsoft has, which is called Microsoft Learn, or Learn Platform. And it's basically called microlearning. I actually developed content recently, which is out there on machine learning and data science, so you can look at that. But there's a topic specifically called Introduction to Machine Learning with Python and Azure Notebooks, and there's the link. So it's great. It walks you through, it demos things, it's very interactive, or it tries to be as much as possible, and it's meant for beginners. So there's a great place to learn, and anything you learn here, most of it's also applicable to just regular Jupyter notebooks, so it's good that way too. Now, I didn't get into too heavily setting up, like what do you need to do. All you have to do is when you get to that main screen, where you saw earlier when you just find Azure, the notebook screen, you just click on the sign in. And then it will ask you, like, what's your account you're going to be going in for, and then it will prompt you for the password for that account. So if you have one, just use it, give it the password, and you're good. If you don't, just go to the create one, and you can create an account, and you're good to go. And once you get in, you'll be brought to this screen, and then you can just start creating projects, upload files, as we just saw. We're good to go. So we covered a lot. I think we did it in pretty good time. But what we did is we talked about what are Azure Notebooks. Now, I really got excited when I discovered Jupyter Notebooks because of all the things I could do, and I really like the fluidity and the ability to integrate documentation with my work, and the ability, it's great for demoing and stuff, especially since you can do multiple languages. So if you want to demonstrate to people how to do R coding, you can do that with Jupyter Notebook. If you want to show someone how to do Python 2 or 3, you can also use Jupyter, and Jupyter can be used on any language just about. For Azure, you can use the notebooks, the languages it supports. There's so many things it can do for you, and free is a great price, but it's all the sharing, the teaching, etc. Lots of features we saw, and we kind of walked through a demo of all the things and how to use it. And I think the few slides are on getting started. It's really easy. Just go in, sign up, and you're good to go. You've got all kinds of stuff to start with, lots of tutorials. There's tons of training. It's one of those places where I think Microsoft's covered the ground really well. The trick now is to get the word out that this is available, it's free, and I'm always a champion for the customer, so anything that's free, I let people know and tell them, go for it. I mean, why not? I hope they don't get rid of it as a free service, and I don't think they will, just because it's so valuable from a training and learning standpoint, and Microsoft's very aware and trying to help customers and everybody learn about these things. So thank you, subscribe, please like, please tell your friends, etc. Hope this is helpful. If you have comments, questions, just put them in the message areas. I do see those, I respond to them, and love the feedback. So thank you.